Sup, Reitanna, it's Reitanna Seishin here. As most of you know, I am a proud pessimist, and am not very, secretive about the things that have happened in my life, and, my life has not been great, even as an adult, it has, well, for those of you who are adults, you know how adult life is, but my childhood, was really messed up, and I think I have a hair in my throat. Ugh. Anyway, and I often talk about, the shit that's happened to me. I've told a lot of my story in my Into the Mind, series. But I would be a fool to say that, like everybody, I've had good moments in my childhood and in my life, of course. It's most likely impossible to not have good moments unless you're one of those unfortunate people who get kidnapped and are kept in a basement for your entire life. I'm not talking about Minky Pie, I'm talking about the real people, and there's some pretty bad horror stories out there. I don't recommend looking them up. They're incredibly depressing. But anyway, I have had good moments in my childhood. There have been, I have cherished memories. As mentioned in the story Anatir's Descent, when innocence comes around, I mention remembering that, childhood was innocent and, fun, carefree, and then I go into then I remember that things were not always so, nice or whatever. But, there are things. Some of them are pretty small, but I've made a list of some things that I remember. I try to remember more, but it's difficult to uncover some things that were better than the majority of the time. So I'm gonna go through what I remember, and if I remember more along the way, then and as per usual, I am very tired, so I am very sorry for sounding very bleh. So, one of my earliest memories, was when I was eating an ice cream cone, and I guess Aaron had just gotten, like, a video camera or something, and, I was like a toddler, but not like so young that I can't remember this. She videotaped me eating an ice cream cone, and then she had me watch the video of me eating an ice cream cone, and she videotaped me watching myself eating an ice cream cone. And then she had me watch that, and I was still eating an ice cream cone. She videotaped that, and she did it so many times that I was watching a tunnel of me watching myself eating ice cream cones. And I do remember it, and it was really funny. I remember what the living room looked like and everything. It was the same house where one of my bad memories were, but I remember that, and that was really funny. I don't know how old I was, but I was old enough to be entertained by an ice cream TV tunnel. Pardon me. Another one of my memories is when we lived on a campground. We lived in tents. Aaron and my stepdad had a tent, and then I had a tent. I don't remember if my brother was living with us. I don't remember how long we lived on the campground. It was a really long time. And it was okay. There weren't a lot of kids. There were a lot of adults, but they were all, friendly. I don't really, I don't know, there were a lot of people around, so I don't think Aaron was very violent at that time. I don't remember. There's probably some suppressed memories or something. But, it was pretty because, it was in Idaho and there was a lot of nature, a lot of forest, and I would go walking around and I had, my own path that I went through, and our tent was right next to a river. And Aaron always told me not to go into the river part of the river. There was this, sort of, I don't know, bog or something that was separated by a big mud mound that I would play in, and play with water skippers. I don't know if you know what water skippers are. They're so cute. They kind of look like spiders, but they only have 4 legs, and they stand on top of the water. Like for you Pokemon fans, Surskit is made to look like a water skipper. And anyway, the thing that I have written down, and I'll get into more campground memories in a second, is I was on one of my walks, and I was really young. I don't remember how old I was, but I was young. Old enough to be entertained by certain things and also not understanding what death was. I was walking through this marsh, and I found a dead baby rodent, and I picked it up, and it was a baby. It looked like it had just been born. Its eyes were still closed. It was furless, and at the time, I didn't know certain animals from each other, so I don't know what kind of rodent it was, but I found it, and I didn't really understand that it was dead and it was disrespectful to, play with it, but I kept it, and only for a day, and I brought it home to my tent, and I played with it like it was a doll. I didn't hurt it. I just, I gave it a name, and I gave it a personality, and I did, even though I didn't understand death and disrespect toward the dead, I did understand that it was no longer alive, and that it could not be kept forever. So I only played with it for a day, and then, I don't remember where I put it. I think I set it somewhere in the dirt or something. I might have buried it. I don't remember if Aaron ever caught me playing with the dead thing, but, some other memories I have are within that same marsh. I saw some really creepy things that now I know are not creepy. I saw these chrysalises, or whatever they were from dragonflies, and they weren't alive, but they were like perfectly formed to look like an insect, and they were broken out of, I don't know how dragonflies live, like what their life cycle is like, but I'm pretty sure they were from dragonflies, and they creeped me out. I was like, and I thought they were gonna attack me because I didn't know that they weren't alive. And another thing is, oh my god, my Petrie and Ducky puppets. I had these rubber Petrie and Ducky puppets from Land Before Time, as they were my 2 favorite characters, especially Ducky. Ducky was my favorite character, and back then I didn't know what unfortunately happened to the original voice actress that voiced Ducky, but that's besides the point. So I play with them, and of course, when Aaron says, don't go into the river, what do? I go into the river. There was a little island, though, that I could hang on to, and the current was really, really strong. But I went onto the island, and I played in the river from the island, so I wasn't in the current. But the current was so strong that it took my Ducky away, and I was so upset. I looked for her everywhere, thinking maybe she got caught on something. But no, I never found her, and I was so upset, and Aaron was like, I told you not to go into the river! And, but I was really upset, and I never went into the river again, except for when we went, what do we call it? Water tubing? River tubing is when we took an inner tube and we'd sit on it and ride the river. It was so fun. But in the little bog that I would swim in, I'd play with the mud. And I think I found a couple of snakes, a couple of little garter snakes that I would hold and then put back into their little home. The best one was, though, when I found Flubber. He was... I actually don't know if it was a he, but I called him he because Flubber... I think Flubber was referred to as a male in the movie Flubber. But I called him Flubber because he was big, and he was fat, and he was green. And he was a caterpillar. I found him floating in the bog, and I saved him, and miraculously he was alive, so he must have just fallen in, and I fell in love with this little caterpillar. His skin was semi-transparent, so when he moved I could see his little organs, and he was so soft, and now that I think about it, he might have had little spots, sort of like Caterpie, I'm not sure, or maybe he was full green. I really don't remember. But I had an oatmeal canister, and I kept him in it with, like, leaves and sticks. And eventually, he made a cocoon. And so I was so happy that I was gonna have a butterfly. But, you know, Aaron and my stepdad were like, he's so big, he's probably gonna turn into a moth. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have a moth. And I was planning on setting the moth free when it turned. But when I moved to Mullen and Flubber was still in his chrysalis, my lovely stepdad, who was not lovely at all, I have a lot of horror stories about him, threw him out. And I hope to God, I really hope that the canister was open, and that poor little moth or butterfly was able to escape and fly out. I was so mad, and Aaron was actually pretty upset too, but, you know, he was not a good person. What other things on the campground? I remember seeing a satellite for the first time in the sky, thinking it was a really slow shooting star, and the adults there, they explained to me that satellites look a lot like stars because of the light reflecting off them, but they move really slowly. Well, it appears like they're moving slowly to us, but I believe they're moving decently fast in Earth's orbit. But, and then I used to catch toads, and I love toads. They would just, they're so bumpy and cute, and I remember trapping one under a bowl, and, while we were catching earthworms to fish with, and, I trapped one under a bowl, but he was a strong-ass toad, so he escaped, and he was gone when I lifted the bowl, and I was like, yeah, my toad! I never hurt any of the animals, that I caught, but I probably wasn't as gentle as I should have been, but I always let them go. I never kept them, because we were on a campground, and they weren't pets, and at least I understood that. I loved animals, and I, had as much respect for them as I could as an animal-loving child. And I did understand that they were also living, and I shouldn't hurt them. Except for insects. Insects and spiders, I didn't understand that they also felt pain and were living. But that's a whole different spiel. What else did I do on the campground that I really loved? Oh, when Aaron was fishing, I found a tree with berries in it that looked like cherries, but they were dark. And Erin always told me that if I found a berry, to bring it to her so she could see if it was poisonous or not. I'm not gonna lie, there were times where she was actually a mother. She wasn't a good mother, but when she was a mother, she was a mother. And it's really unfortunate because poor little child me was confused between the love she showed and everything else. But when she was a mother, it was nice. And so I found these cherries. They were cherries. They ended up being black cherries. And I brought one to her, and I was like, Mom, they're cherries. And, well, she obviously wasn't the most intelligent person in the world. I think you guys understand that for how much I've talked about her. So whenever I brought her a berry, she would eat it to see if it tasted poisonous, basically. Again, not very smart. But she ate it and she was like, oh, that is a cherry. And she told me, before eating the whole thing, bite into it in case there are worms. I always did that with fruit. We also had a crabapple tree in our backyard in Mullen, but I'll get to that. So I spent the entire time climbing this cherry tree, and it was huge, but there were a lot of branches that I could sit on, and I ate cherries, and it was really nice. That's all I can remember from the campground. My air conditioning is making the worst sound. Stop it! Hi, rat. One of my other earliest memories is probably something that a lot of children did. When I was learning the alphabet, L, M, N, O always counted as one letter to me, and the letter was called Elemento. And I don't remember when I learned that it was different letters, but it was just funny. I would write down L-M-N-O, but I've always had trouble understanding, things when it comes to speech. For those of you who know, I don't speak very well because I spent most of my childhood silent. So this alphabet was, it just, this one letter was Elemento, and, some other things that I misheard was make fun of someone. I would say, stop making fun of me. Stop making fun of him, don't make fun of anybody. And then, bless you was bless you. There were other things, like, I would call tater tots teeter-totters. I would call earmuffs ear-muffins, and caterpillars were, if you guys listen to muffins, capitillars. So, that's where I got that. Another earliest memory was I remember specifically that I was 3 years old because I was born in 1990, and this happened in 1993, when Nightmare Before Christmas came out in theaters. And the theater was practically empty. It was really late at night, and I was watching it for the first time. But I think I got really bored being in the theater, or I wanted to get closer or something. I don't remember what the deal was. But my Erin and whoever her boyfriend was at the time, I don't, so many stepdads, I don't remember who it was, were watching, and they weren't necessarily paying much attention to me, so, I got off my seat, and I crawled underneath all of the chairs so that I could sit on the floor right in front of the front row so that the screen was nice and big. And I don't know if they freaked out, but I'm pretty sure they probably freaked out because, child missing. But I was 3, it was late, and I fell asleep in the front of the theater. I can only imagine them looking for me all over the seats and finding me curled up on the floor. So, that was nice. Sort of separated these other memories into places that I lived. So, I lived in Mullen, Idaho. It was one of the smallest towns. But it was one of my favorite places to live. Because it was so small, practically everybody knew everyone. Our classroom had like 10 students, and I had a couple of friends, but since I was a little tomboy, most of my friends were boys. I didn't get along with girls. I had a lot of problems getting along with girls during, even, as a teenager. Most of my friends were boys or girls that were more able to make friends with boys. It wasn't a crush thing, it wasn't a romantic thing, it was just that we shared more interests with boys than girls. I did get more girly as I grew up, though. So in Mullen, there was a football field, where the high school would play football, and, the people would come in and watch. And, there was this cliff on the side that led up to a street and with some houses and stuff. And my friends and I would climb the cliff. And it was rather steep. It had a tiny bit of a slope, but with the plants and the rocks, it was decently easy to climb, and we would challenge ourselves to see who could climb the fastest. And I was the fastest. Bragging rights. So, my friends who were boys were always impressed with a girl that could beat them. It was during a time where, the battle of the sexes was really, really, so, the 90s. So I remember doing that. There was a little song that I made when I was in the car, and I'd sing it to myself all the time, and it was really stupid. It went, looking out the window, lots of things to see, da-da-da-da-da-da, I need to go pee. And I couldn't think of any other words but da-da-da-da-da-da. But I always sang it, and, I don't know, I had to find little things to entertain myself, because, especially since I didn't have a bedroom in the house that we lived in, there were 2 bedrooms, and at the time in Mullen, Aaron was with Mike, my stepdad, who threw away the caterpillar. It's unfortunate that I ended up falling in love with a man named Mike, but not so unfortunate. It was tiny. I get over it. I can get over it. But, so there was the room that Aaron and Mike slept in, and then my brother lived with us at the time. This was before he ran away, and he had the bedroom. So my play place was 2 little corners. I had one corner where I kept all of my toys, and that was, at the right of the front door. And then there was a corner that was closed off between an armchair and the couch, so that I could climb over and play in this little corner. And I hated playing in front of people, so most of the dialogue was in my head. It's the whole social phobia going on, and often if somebody was watching me, I'd stop and just kind of comb my fingers through my doll's hair, whatever. Do I have my Betty Spaghetti doll on this? Yes, I do. My toys were real simple. At the time, Erin worked in Montana at the Silver Dollar, and she would bring home, she was probably blowing the boss or something, because she would get, either heavy discounts or things for free that she would bring me. Oh my god, I remember this little toy. And I was old enough to know what a penis was. I was unfortunately exposed to sex at a very young age, so like a lot of kids who end up discovering sex at a young age, you make your dolls fuck each other. But I was old enough to know what a penis was, and she brought me home this toy that was cylindrical, and it had a hole through the entire thing, and it was filled with gel, and I think it was blue. And it was a sort of a fidgety kind of toy, like a fidget spinner. And it would just, like, slip in your hands because the plastic it was encased in, would move along the outside and then through the inside. I don't know what they were called, but it was really funny, and it entertained me that it looked like a penis, but I understood that it wasn't supposed to look like a penis, so it was just a toy, and I'm sure the adults also made some jokes about it. So, another one of my memories in Mullen, one of my best friends was Matt, and he was in my 3rd grade class. My other best friend was Logan. And, they were typical little boys that made fun of the girl, but also cared about the girl. So, I would hang out with them a lot, and I'm not sure if we were also with Logan, but I'm pretty sure Logan was also there. Logan was decently violent toward me on many occasions, but and we'd make fun of each other. I would say that, you guys are so stupid, I hate you, stupid fucking boys. I didn't say fucking, but, but I did have fun with them, and they were my best friends. And Matt had some sodas, and, I think he had gotten it from the Exxon across from my house. Everything at the Exxon was really inexpensive. And he had a cart of sodas, and we were drinking them. And, he took one, and he shook it up really hard, and he slammed it on the road we were walking on, and it punctured a little hole that the soda came spurting out, but since it was just one hole, it started spinning, and it just went all over the place, and we were freaking out because we were like, oh my god, it's gonna hit us! But it went down a hill, and it was very funny. Matt also had some ferrets. I don't remember their names, but there was an older one and a younger one, and I'm not sure if they were related. The older one was decently old, and we'd play with them, and I loved them, especially since the younger one, I would wear these, sandals with rubber soles, and the younger one would chew on the rubber soles and just be like, I just loved it so much, and they were cute. At first I thought, they were going to be vicious because they weren't rodents. They had sharp teeth. For those of you who have played with ferrets, but they were cute, and Matt loved these ferrets, and he said, they're not gonna hurt you, they're fun. So I trusted him, and I became friends with these ferrets, and I loved them to death. And every time I went to his house, I was like, can I see your ferrets? And, unfortunately, the older one passed away, and ferrets are social creatures just like rats and guinea pigs, and you need to have more than one. And the younger ferret, he was not sick, he was not old, he was younger, and he was incredibly depressed that his cage mate had passed away. And this is very typical among social animals, that you must have more than one. Same thing happened to my rat Ezio. And unfortunately, the younger ferret passed away due to depression. And Matt was torn apart, I was torn apart, Matt's brother was torn apart. Another memory was visiting the so-called haunted house. There was this little abandoned house that had graffiti over it, and had red spray paint that said, "Do not enter," and as children we were like, oh, it's blood, but now I know that blood dries brown. We dared each other to go in, and then we just decided to go in together. And it was a real small house, and everything inside was broken, and the legend was that the family was murdered or something, but it was probably just a stupid little house that teenagers had sex in. So there were mattresses. But there was a lot of broken glass and stuff, and we explored it just once, and then we left because we didn't experience any hauntings or anything. Another one was with Matt, and I'm not sure if Logan was there, but playing with fire. That was fun and not dangerous at all. we went into his basement and he had these aerosol cans and matches and stupid kids are stupid. And he was like, I discovered something cool I could do with fire. And he lit the match and he sprayed it with the fucking aerosol can and it just made this huge flamethrower fire. And I was like, oh my god, that's so scary, but ooh, that's so cool! Stupid. We were lucky to have not caused any damage to ourselves or the property. But we just were setting off matches with aerosol cans. It was funny, but it was stupid. In my school in Mullen, there were two schools in the town. There was the elementary school and there was the high school, and they were both right next to each other. The elementary school went from kindergarten to 6th grade, and then after 6th grade, you'd go on to the high school. And I think I was there from 2nd grade to 3rd grade. I didn't finish out 3rd grade, I think. I don't remember. And I didn't start out in 2nd grade. I had moved in midway or toward the end of 2nd grade. But in 2nd grade, I've always been a much better reader than a majority of my class. So when my teacher discovered that I was reading 2nd grade level books way faster than anybody else, she took me aside and she's like, and the library had the grade books separated by stickers. So I think 2nd grade was green stickers. She took me aside and she's like, listen, you're reading books too fast. So I don't want you to pick the ones with the green stickers. I want you to pick the ones with the red stickers. And the red stickers were 4th grade. So I was like, okay, whatever. So I started picking out short novels with the red stickers. And I would be reading these stickers, and not reading these stickers, I'd be reading the books, and I read this really cool one about, it was sort of a, oh man, what's that story with, the king who touched things that turned to gold? I don't remember his name. Someone tell me his name. But it was like that, except it was this boy who loved chocolate. And, I don't remember what it was called, so if any of you, older people ever read a book like this, please tell me if you remember what it was called. But, this boy loved chocolate, and he hated brushing his teeth, like most kids do, and he hated eating his vegetables, and he hated eating all the stuff that he didn't want to eat. He always wanted to eat chocolate. So he went to this candy store. I think he found like a 50-cent piece. All you kids are like, what are 50-cent pieces? And he went to the candy store to buy some chocolate. And he was looking around the candy store and he wanted something different. So he went up to the guy and he was like, I love chocolate. I want something different. So he handed him a box that was big enough to hold a softball, and it was for 50 cents. So he took it home, but he unwrapped it and found, I think it was just a chocolate coin in this huge box. And he was really disappointed, but he ate it. And the next morning, everything he touched turned to chocolate. But apparently not dishes, I guess. The rules were really weird. So his orange juice turned to chocolate milk. His broccoli turned into chocolate. His toothpaste turned into chocolate. If I remember correctly, eventually he started getting tired of it, and the power was also causing some problems, just like in the story with the king and the gold. And when he accidentally turned his friends into chocolate, he was becoming desperate to reverse the spell, and I don't remember how it ended. But yeah, that's really the only book that really stood out to me. Except for these books. I don't remember if it was in Mullen, though. I think it was in Spokane that I read these books about, was her name Eleanor Quinby or something? I don't remember. But, there were books about a young inventor, and her life, and how she was really artistic, and I don't remember all of it, except I do remember her having some like blue oatmeal or something that made her throw up, that she didn't eat, but I guess there were maggots in it or something, but she saw it and she threw up or something. I don't remember. Going back to Mullen, the cemetery. Oh, bad memory with the cemetery, but I'm not going to go into that because this is supposed to be a positive video. Matt and I would go to the cemetery to find tombstones with our last names on it and pretend that they were our relatives, when in reality, they most likely weren't, because, you know, there are tons of people with the same last name who are not related at all. For instance, the guy who invented cigarettes' last name was Reynolds, and my last name's Reynolds, and whoever invented Reynolds foil was named Reynolds. So, but there was this huge stock of rhubarb, and we'd go to the cemetery, specifically for looking at the tombstones and for harvesting this rhubarb. And it was huge, and if you've never had rhubarb, it is just it was so good. It's really sour, and we loved sour stuff, and we'd just pick it, and we'd eat it, and, you know, it was just fun. I put down Playtime Corner in the living room. I already explained about that. I also had a walkie-talkie. No, not a walkie-talkie, sorry, a Walkman. Reitanna, what are Walkmans? We were born in the 2000s. Walkmen were these portable cassette players. What's a cassette? A cassette came before CDs, and also came after 8-tracks. What's an 8-track? So cassettes were what we had music on, and stories. Oh, I forgot another thing in the campground. There was this book I had called Pecos Bill, which I would say Pecos Spill. And it came with an audiobook, and it was narrated by Robin Williams. I didn't know that until recently when I tried looking it up. And I would listen to it over and over again. It's this really silly sort of Western children's story. I recommend looking it up because it's really cute. But I would listen to that also on my Walkman. I had tapes from that Aaron had from the 80s. So I had Madonna's album. I think the album was titled Papa Don't Preach. And I also had Tiffany's album, Hold a I have like 2 of Tiffany's songs. I cannot find her music anywhere. My external hard drive decides to take forever to load. Every so often. Not all the time. Come on, Elements H drive. Let's go. I'm gonna go to music, and I'm gonna go to the T's, Tiffany. Hold an Old Friend's Hand, and I have All This Time and Radio Romance. I wish I could find that entire album, but I could not find it. I could probably do it now, but I'd listen to those all the time, and I'd learn as many of the words as I could understand, and I'd sing to them. After I also heard, Blue by Eiffel 65 for the very first time, I decided that my favorite color, instead of red, was blue. And I loved that song. The first time I ever heard it was at a friend's birthday party when we went roller skating. The friend, she was mentally retarded, but she was, you know, one of my best friends, at the time. When I was not in Mullen. This was before I lived in Mullen. Yeah, so I was in 2nd grade. And I made friends with this mentally retarded girl. I think she had Down syndrome. I don't remember fully. And I was invited to her birthday party. because I was, like, one of the only kids that didn't make fun of her. So, and I remember specifically, I have suffered from insomnia since a very young age. And unfortunately, I couldn't get to sleep when I spent the night at her house. But she had Mario Paint. And she also had a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle video game. I think it was the second one. So I played that for a while. But Mario Paint, oh my god. I had my headphones on, and I played that all night long. And I think I ended up getting, like, 3 hours of sleep or something. But anyway, back to Mullen. In the forest next to the football field that I mentioned, there was this pond outside of the forest. The forest was real small. And, excuse me. And, so there was this pond, and, another bad memory I have with the pond, but I'm not gonna get into that. And it had a tiny itty bitty little creek. I don't even know if it counts as a creek because it was so small. It was about 2 feet wide, and it was not deep enough to even cover our shoes. But there was a little bridge, and I always have dreams about this little creek and this little bridge, but the forest is always much bigger and much more lush. But it was a very pretty forest, and I loved walking through it. I always walked through it when I went to the football field to play, because that's where we played. And it was real fun to run around and stuff. And I think I invented another song when in there, but I don't entirely remember. But, you know, we would play pretend and stuff, and the forest was just really nice. I've always been a country girl. I've always, been in the wilderness, so coming to the city it was just not fun. I've always hated the city. But I'm going back to Idaho, so I'm so excited about that. Next, my dog Kona. We adopted him as a puppy when we were... It wasn't Hidden Lake. I was really young. I remember what it looked like, and I remember that the landlord was a bitch. And I think it was the same place where I got bit by the pit bull, and we were watching the red moon, which I believe... I have to look up. I think a solar eclipse is when the shadow covers the moon, and a lunar eclipse is when the sunlight covers the moon in such a way that, where the moon covers the sun and the moon shows up red. I'd have to look that up. But we were watching it. And I'll get back to Kona in a second. This pit bull, some of Aaron's friends had a pair of pit bulls, and I do remember this, actually. I don't know if I was 2 or 3, but I remember this. I wanted to ride the doggy like a pony. And I was not being supervised. And I was wearing 3D glasses for no reason at all. And I wanted to ride the doggy like a pony. But the doggy didn't like that. So the doggy ended up turning around and biting little Kara in the face. And little Kara was crying, and her lip was bleeding. It was her upper lip, and she was bleeding, and she was scared. But I got cleaned up, and I, have always had this animal sense. And there are ants. So many ants in this stupid apartment. Okay. Even they're immune to raid, I swear to God. But that very night, after I got cleaned up, we were in a room. It was really late at night, and both of the pit bulls were lying down, and I came up to the one that bit me, and I said, "I'm sorry," and I pet him, and I was like, "I'm so sorry," but I said, she just didn't want to be ridden like a pony, or however my English was, and that's when I discovered the difference between a girl doggy and a boy doggy. They said, "Do you see that thing on, below its belly?" And I said, "Yes." And they were like, that means it's a boy doggy. So I was like, oh, he's a boy doggy. And the pit bull was not violent toward me at any other time. And this is where it gets me, that if a dog bites once, it gets euthanized. It was a different time back then, so I'm hoping, I'd be very happy, I'm pretty sure, and I'm hoping that the dog did not get euthanized. I hope that they did not tell anybody that the dog bit a young child. But it was my fault, and I admitted that. As a young child, I said I tried to ride him like a pony, and he didn't like it. So he bit me, and I deserved it. I understood that at a young age, and I hate the fact that if an animal bites once, it gets euthanized, but if a human punches another person, they don't get euthanized. It's like, pick your battles. If the dog is constantly violent toward, people, then that's a little different. I mean, I don't like euthanization, but I also don't like, how lenient we are with human beings. I'm gonna not get into that. This is not supposed to be a LAR. So Kona was my puppy. And I adopted him when I was in the same place where I got bitten by the pit bull. And he was a little puppy. He was my best friend. He was half German Shepherd and half Golden Retriever. Very, very, very loyal breeds. Very loyal dog. And he was white with mixed in splotches of light yellow that made him look like buttered popcorn. And you couldn't even tell that they were splotches. He just looked like he had some yellow in him. Like another dog peed on him in places. But it was a much lighter yellow. And he was my best friend. We grew up together, and he was the most amazing dog. We had him in Silver Hills, but I lived in Silver Hills after Mullen. And we lived together in Mullen, and I would play with him in the backyard and in the football field, and he just understood me, and I understood him, and we were just best friends, and he was just this big old dog, and I loved him so much. But the best part about Kona, was when I'd walk around the town. Sometimes I'd walk around alone. You were kind of allowed to. There was some crime, very minuscule, but not a lot, because you just could not get away with it. And, because there was just, it was such a small town, and, yeah, you would think that it would be easy, but, so we'd walk around, and he, most of the time did not need a leash. He only, I'd carry the leash around with me, just in case. But I'd walk on the dilapidated railroad, and I had some bullies, and the best thing about Kona is when they would come up, they would see me, and they would start to bully me, and Kona would growl and chase them away. And the parents of those kids would complain that we have a violent dog, but I would say, your kids are bullies, and my dog didn't touch them. He only growled, he was protecting me. So, I love him. Unfortunately, when we lived in Silver Hills, he jumped over the fence and never came back. And I was so mad when my stepdad Mike, who was still with us, he was my longest stepdad, he later said, I think I saw Kona in the back of someone's truck, but I didn't say anything. I was like, why? That could have been our dog! If you asked the family to bring the dog to us, and if he recognized me, then that's our fucking dog, you stupid piece of shit. I hated him. He was the worst person. Another thing in Mullen were the silver mines. And, so they would mine for silver. And probably other things. I think there were other things in those mines. But every now and then there would be a mine blast. And it would feel like short little earthquakes. And it was so funny because they would scare the crap out of me. And one happened when we were in class. And everybody was like, earthquake! And they were like, no, that's just a mine blast. Don't worry. And another one happened when I was in my house. And it made dishes, fall off shelves and stuff, and we're like, ah! And, let's see, there was another set of woods that was much bigger. And I think it was by the cemetery. And Matt and I would purposefully get lost in the woods. We were so cute. We'd have little backpacks with granola bars, and we'd have jump ropes for climbing ropes, and we'd have all these little things. We'd have a bunch of band-aids, and we were going on a trip. And we would get lost in these woods. We'd take all sorts of turns. We wouldn't follow the road or anything, and we'd get lost. And then it became a challenge to see if we could get out. And we always did. We just had the best sense of direction because we grew up in, I think he grew up in Mullen, and I've grown up in Idaho since, I was a baby. I was born in Idaho, and we're no stranger to nature. So we'd always get out. Sometimes it would take much longer, but we would always get out. Water. Another thing we'd do, together, me and the boys, Matt and Logan, would catch garter snakes. Garter snakes are harmless. The biggest they get are about, a foot or so long. And we'd catch them and we'd play with them. And the funnest part was when we catch the little babies slithering around, and we'd hold them, and they would intertwine between our fingers. They never tried to constrict us. I think they eat bugs. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you know a lot about snakes, garter snakes, not garden snakes, garter. But they would wrap around our fingers and a little bit on our wrists, but they never went tight. They never constricted. And we never kept them. We would always put them back. But we were really gentle with them and everything. We loved them, and the boys thought it was just so cool that this girl was not afraid of snakes. They were so impressed with me all the time, even though they'd make fun of me constantly and force me to do things like eat corn, candy corn, which I've always hated. They would make bets and said, you have to eat candy corn, and I was like, ew, no. And if I lost the bet, I would be like, I'm still not eating it, and they'd pin me to the ground and force it into my mouth. And they were so mean, but they were so nice at the same time. It's just like, girls and boys, you can't live with them, you can't live without them. But it was also fun because there was no law about picking up after your dog if they shat in your lawn. So, but garter snakes were brown, and they would also sleep in this little pile. They would curl up in this cute little pile. And it was normal for us to see like what looked like a pile of poop and go up to at least look at it to see if it was a snake. And one time, it was a snake, and I was alone. I think I was walking home from school, and I was like, that's probably poop. It looks like poop. Oh, it's not poop. Oh, it's a snake. Hi! And, he or she was curled up in a little coil, and it was just so cute. And I picked it up, and took it home, and I played with it for a little bit, and then I let it go. And it was just cute. My crabapple tree that I mentioned, for those of you who know what crabapples are, you know that they're like the I'm trying to think of a good word. Just like the apple that nobody wants. But I loved them. For those of you who don't know what crabapples are, they're really small, they're green, they're really small, they don't have a lot of meat on them, and they're very sour. But we had a tree of them, and I would go and I'd climb the tree, and I'd sit in the tree, and the first time I discovered that we had a crabapple tree, I was like, ooh, apples! And Erin knew that it was a crabapple tree because of the landlord who, said, showed her the house and everything. And she was like, those are crab apples. And I'm like, what are crab apples? Are they made of crab? Or do they look like crabs? Are there crabs inside? And she would tell me that they're small and they're sour. But she also told me, look out for holes in the apples and watch out for worms. if I insisted on eating them. And I went and I grabbed one, made sure that it didn't have any holes, and I ate it, and I went, and I got all scrunched up in the face like you do when you eat your first sour thing. And it wasn't my first sour thing, but it was really sour. But I ended up liking them, so I would just sit in the tree and eat them. It was just fun. I think I already mentioned walking around the entire town with Matt and Logan. We'd just walk around, especially in winter when it was, everything was covered in snow and there were icicles. We'd go out and we'd pick icicles and we'd eat them. And we'd eat snow. Watch out for the yellow snow. So, we'd just walk around and talk and be stupid, make fun of each other and play around and stuff. I remember when I was in elementary school, when I was in band was when we were learning about music, we were learning about different instruments, and we played the recorder. It was so exciting. Our elementary school did not have a band room, but the high school did, so we'd walk over to the high school, and we'd go into the band room to learn about music. It was real simple. Mostly we learned the classes of instruments, like wind instruments, brass instruments, string instruments, etc. And I really liked it. And we learned how to read very simple sheet music, and we learned how to play the recorder. And I wasn't very good because if you know what a recorder is, it's a complicated instrument when it comes to certain notes. And I could hit the regular notes with the main holes, and I could play tunes on them, but I could not hit the certain notes where you have to cover certain holes and the hole in the back, and it was just so frustrating. But it was a particularly windy day, and it was also raining, and we were walking back to the elementary school after music class, and I had my umbrella, and the wind was so strong that it turned my umbrella inside out and carried me a couple of feet forward. And we, as little third graders, just thought it was the funniest thing in the world, and we were just laughing. In the winter, the snowplow, that's what they're called, snowplow. The snowplow would clear the roads of snow and dump it in our playground. But that didn't stop us. Every single student at recess would be playing on the snow mound, would pack it in really, really tight, and would rub their mittens or gloves. They weren't like the mittens or gloves we have in California, where they're just fabric. They were padded with this water-resistant fabric on the outside. Excuse me, this material. And we would pat the snow, and then we'd rub over certain areas to turn it into smooth ice. And that way, we made a castle with a slide, and it was really fun, but at the time, I think I had just moved to Mullen or something. At the time, I didn't have many friends at all, and I was constantly made fun of. I was made fun of all my life for, no reason. But I would try to play on the mound, and they would kick me off, but I enjoyed helping to pat the snow down. It was really filthy because of the snowplow, obviously, and it was on the road. But I would help, smooth it down and stuff. They just wouldn't let me on top. Speaking of snow and ice, we had ice sculpture day. And that's when we went to the park, and it was, snowy and stuff, and we had a contest to see who could make the best ice sculptures. And unfortunately, I was alone, like I always was. I think this was when I transferred in second grade, before I met Matt and Logan. Ice sculpture day was where we had a contest to see who could build the best ice sculpture, and we had bottles of food coloring to help color the snow. And I don't remember what I made. I think it was just a crappy unicorn that I dug out of the snow. It wasn't 3D, it didn't stand up. It was just on the ground, flat, and it just wasn't very good. I mean, I wasn't born an amazing artist, but there were pairs and older students that really did some good jobs, and of course I was jealous when they won, and I was like, I should have won. I'm special. Mommy always says I'm special. But, growing up, you realize that nobody's special. So, I was real jealous. But now I understand the practice and hard work that goes through it. Since, I make stuff out of clay and I'm still not, fabulous at that. So, but it was fun. It was very fun. And also in elementary school, we would have chocolate milk every Friday. We would have a little carton of milk every day, and I didn't like milk back then. It was 2%, so it wasn't that bad. 2% is like the best tasting milk, cow milk. And, but every Friday we would get a carton of chocolate milk because Fridays were special. Also in Mullen, we were all given PlayStation 1s for a certain amount of time and given learning games. And we would be assigned homework on these learning games. And I don't remember what my favorite one was called, but I also rented another game it was a really funny game, and it wasn't for homework, it was for fun, about outer space, and you were playing this silly hero. I do not remember what it was called. I'd have to look at PS1s in, PS1 games that were in, let's see, if I was in 3rd grade, I was 9. No, I was 8? Somewhere around there. Late 90s. Another thing that Matt and I did was behind the Exxon, there was a huge puddle of mud. It was huge. The asphalt was broken, so it made kind of like a pool of watery mud, but there was also oil mixed in. So it made the mud come out like it would be covering rocks and stuff and the ground in sort of sheets. So when you pull up the mud, you don't get a big glob. You get like this huge sheet of mud that wouldn't break. And we played in the mud because kids. And then when I came home, we had to throw the outfit out that I was wearing because I was covered in mud. I caught my first fish in Mullen, and I don't think I ever caught a fish again. But, we ate a lot of fish because Aaron would fish in the river, and Mike was also a fisher. And I wanted to catch a fish so bad. So I put a string on a stick, and I tied a little worm to the end of the string, and I wasn't allowed to go near the river. So I found this other pond that led to the pond by the majigger, the football field. And it also led to the river. There was this on one side there was this like sewer hole, this pipe where the water came in from the river, and then on the other side there was a pipe that made the water go underground to the other pond where there was also a pipe. And then that pond had the little creek, and etc. I don't know. The creek is probably dried up by now. Makes me sad. And so I went fishing in this little pond, and I thought, if this tube goes to the river, then if I put the fish, the worm in the tube, then I can get a fish. And I tried for days upon days, and finally I caught a little trout. And I want to eat it. I wanted to take it home, and I want to eat it. But Aaron knew fish, I guess, and I guess the trout was endangered, and you had to have a license to fish for them during, like, a certain fishing season. So I was so sad she made me throw it in the river. And I was so sad because it was my trout, and it was my first fish, and I caught it all myself. In Mullen, I also learned to swim. I was very late in learning how to swim and ride a bike and everything. How long has this gone? Jeez. I might have to split this into different videos. How many memories do I have in Mullen? I might end this soon. Learning to swim. There was a pool house, with a big pool, the grown-up pool, and the kiddie pool, which came up to my waist at the time. And whenever somebody would teach me how to swim, I couldn't do it. I was scared. So I'd use the kiddie pool, and I'd learn how to swim in the kiddie pool. Eventually, I was able to go into the shallow end of the big pool, and eventually I was able to hold myself up in the water, using doggy paddle. And then I was able to realize that human beings actually float as long as we don't struggle. So I was able to discover that if I stayed still, I would still float. And I could, I'd kick my feet to make sure that I stayed afloat, because yes, you are going to sink a little bit, but if you struggle, you're going to sink a lot of it. And so I was able to go to the deep end, no problem. And I met a teenager that shared my same name. It was the second Kara that I had ever met, and I thought it was the coolest thing, because at the time I thought I was the only Kara, because it's not a very common name in Idaho, apparently. I met a lot of Karas here in California that they didn't spell it the way I spelled it. So that's how I learned to swim. And then dodgeball was also different in our school. In elementary school, we'd do wall dodgeball, and that's when everybody in the class stands against the wall, and one person throws the dodgeball to try and hit somebody, but we were not allowed to leave the wall or switch places. We would just have to run away from the ball, and it would hit the wall, and it was fun. It was much more fun than traditional dodgeball that I ended up discovering was traditional dodgeball in high school. The Exxon across the street from my house, the candy was, like I said, everything was real inexpensive, and the candy was especially inexpensive, and the dude who owned the Exxon really liked all the kids, not liked all the kids, but, enjoyed our company and us coming in. And there was a Tootsie Rolls are not just chocolate. There was a bin filled with different flavors of Tootsie Rolls. And they were the most amazing things, and I love the flavored Tootsie Rolls. I'm not too crazy about the chocolate ones because they don't taste like chocolate very much. And we grab handfuls of them and plop them on the counter, and he wouldn't count them. They were all a penny. He would just estimate how much there were, and he'd say a number and then put it in a paper bag for us. That's also where I got my Pokemon cards. And also where I got my very first Jawbreaker. And I licked that thing for a couple of years. I had a cat named Spaz. He was a Himalayan with markings that made him look like a Siamese, but Himalayans are real fluffy, super poof. And he thought he was a dog because he grew up with dogs, and he thought he was a dog. So we walked him on a leash. We walked him like a dog, and he was fine with that. He was also an outdoor cat, but he wouldn't go far. He was never in danger. We never had crazies that would kill your cats when they're walking around. The dilapidated train tracks I mentioned, we would walk to school on those because there was no train anymore. And I believe it was the fastest route. And in third grade, and I think Matt's house was on the way? I don't remember. Somehow we would meet each other on the train tracks. So my first technically boyfriend, his name was Danny Munson. And I don't count him as my first boyfriend, but he was technically my first boyfriend. We were just really close friends that we had little crushes on each other, and it was funny because he was one of my bullies, but it was that I'm just making fun of you because I like you sort of thing. And I had these friends, who I did not share the same grades with. I don't remember what the son's name was, but there was Chanel and Chantel were his sisters, and I think they were in high school, and the boy was, I think, a grade lower than me, but we became friends as well. And Matt and Logan, we'd all hang out together. But Danny was over because I think he was friends with the boy. Did they have an older brother? I don't remember! I don't remember what his name was. I think his name was Chad. Yes, his name was Chad. And Danny was over, and we were listening to Spice Girls, because Spice Girls was the thing. And, we were in the girls' room, and I was playing with this tiny little computer that wasn't actually a computer. It was a computer speaker made to look like a computer, and it was so cute. I thought it was the cutest thing. And, the boys came in, and the girls, like, forced me onto the bed and forced Danny onto me and said, kiss her, because, you know, they were old enough to know, ooh, you like her. And luckily, I turned my head at the very last second, so he only got my cheek. But after that, it was sort of like, you know, less bullying, and then I like you. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of like you too. And so we'd walk around and hold hands because we're little kids and we had crushes on each other. And he lived in the motel with his grandmother, and he'd invite me over, and one of his neighbors in the motel had Mortal Kombat, so we'd play Mortal Kombat. I don't remember which Mortal Kombat it was, but I remember laughing my ass off when I got a fatality against Danny, and he fell off a building or something and was flailing through the air and then landed in a pit of spikes, and it was just the funniest thing to me. and I believe we only kissed once, and we were hanging out in, I think in a corner where the lamp was while his grandmother was knitting doilies, and he was like, you know, we've never kissed before. At his house we'd also play, oh my god. Oh, what was that? Ah! It had a clown car. There were cars. There was a clown car, and it was like a monster truck type thing. Oh my god, I have to pause this. I have to remember what it was called. Twisted Metal. I think we played Twisted Metal 2 or something. I don't remember, but I was always the car with the big wheels on each side, and I don't know. And but his grandmother would knit doilies and sweaters and stuff, and we were hanging out the corner like we always hung out in, and we were little kids, so it's not like, hey, you guys can't be alone together. And he said, you know, we've never kissed before, and I was like, I'm really nervous, and he was like, we can do it, it's just quick. And so we did the cute little kid quick peck on the lips, and we were so embarrassed, and we were like, okay, well, I liked that. And he was like, I like that too. But we didn't do it again. We never did it again. And unfortunately I had to move, and we didn't get to properly break up. I did end up seeing him at the ski resort, and he seemed like he was overly bragging about a girlfriend he had, as if to try and make me jealous, and I was a little jealous, but I don't think he was telling the truth. Whether he was or not, it really didn't matter to me. I didn't have another boyfriend until 7th grade. And then at the far end of the town was Town Hall, and the sidewalks were made so crappy. There was this one sidewalk that was about a foot off of the friggin' road, and me, being so daring, because I was reckless and I was daring, I rode my bike right off of that sidewalk, and I was sure I was gonna land, but I didn't, because I didn't jump at the proper time, and my wheel went right down, it flipped me over, and I scraped my knee. But I was no stranger to injuries. There was a time when I was little and I would have a stubbed toe like every single day. So I got a nice huge scrape on my knee. I already mentioned eating icicles. Oh, it was also the first time I ever watched the movie Mars Attacks. I loved that movie, even though I had no idea, all the dirty parts. I didn't understand all the dirty parts, and I didn't understand the violence and stuff. But I would watch that at Chad's house. I'd also watch Power Rangers at Chad's house. I just liked it because of all the people and the pretty colors, and when I was little, I was the Pink Ranger, because I was a girl, and I liked pink. And also, wild sunflowers would grow in the town, and there were some sunflowers next to part of the calmer part of the river, and they would bloom and have their little sunflower seeds in the middle, and they were huge. They were huge sunflowers. And so I'd cut off the top, and I'd bring it home, and in October, they would usually produce the seeds around October time. And Aaron would roast them so deeply that you could eat the shell. And I liked that. I already mentioned the silver dollar. Oh, on one Christmas, I got a bunch of Betty Spaghetti stuff. Betty Spaghetti was this really cute little doll with this crazy plastic hair that looked like spaghetti noodles. And I loved it. And I kept them all neatly in a box. I had a box dedicated to my Betty Spaghetti stuff. And somehow, I lost everything but Betty herself. I lost her horse, I lost her friend, and I only had Betty. And I was so upset. This is also around the time where Pokemon came out. And so I had a lot of Pokemon stuff. They would sell a lot of Pokemon stuff at the Exxon. I had all sorts of cards, and I had coloring books, and I had plushies and stuff. So I turned my home into a Pokemon museum with all of my stuff. Then we also had these churros that apparently nobody here has ever heard of. These churros were like churros, but they were filled with cherry jelly, and they were so good, and I loved them, and nobody here has ever heard of them, and the churros here are so disappointing because they're just cinnamon, they don't have jelly in them, and I'm just so mad. And they'd come in these big, frozen bags, and I just loved them. I also chipped my front tooth. I had my adult front teeth in at that time, and we had our dishes, drying in the dish rack, and I wanted a cup. I just wanted a cup, but it was stuck. So I pulled on it, and it flipped up, and caught my tooth, and chipped it. And it's still here to this day. And of course it hurt. I was crying, but they checked my teeth and everything, and they were fine. It didn't hit a nerve. It was just aching for a few days. We also made a Kool-Aid stand, that I made $7. And that was so much money that I ever made myself, and I was so proud of my $7 at the Kool-Aid stand. And then Logan had a Game Boy. I never had a Game Boy. So I'd play Pokemon on his Game Boy, but sometimes he would go into boy mode and say, "No, girls are not allowed." And then sometimes he'd go into half-boy mode where he's like, "You can play for only this amount of time." So, but I play Pokemon, and his dad would also babysit me sometimes, and we played at Pokemon Stadium on his 64. And I was just so jealous that they had these game systems, because the only game system that I had was the PS1, that I had to do my homework with, and had to give back, obviously, at a certain point in time. But it was like just when the PS1 had come out, and they were so excited about all these learning games, and they were like, if our kids use video games to learn, maybe it would make learning more fun. And it did. The last thing in Mullen that I wrote down was my first falafel. Now, falafel was touch and go with me. I I hated it. The first time I tried it, I hated it. It was so gross. But Aaron and Mike made me eat the food that I didn't like. You know, stop forcing your kids to eat food that they don't need if they don't like it, please. But eventually, we had it again, because they were so easy to make apparently, and I liked it better the second time. And then the third time I liked it even better. And now I like falafels. So, yeah. So, yeah, if you guys liked listening to this positive, not really a lore, just memory lane sort of thing, I might actually put this in the Into the Mind playlist, because it kind of is. Sort of. Not really into the mind, but into the childhood. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. You guys give me ideas. If you listen this far, give me some ideas of what I should do with this. Let me know if you liked this. If you liked it, I'll keep going. If it really doesn't sparkle with you, then, you know, I'll just be like, well, yeah, fuck it. So, and if you listen this far, thank you very much. Your continuing support is my blood. So, yeah, if you like this video, leave a like, and click the little bell. Subscribe and click the little bell. Become a Reitannite. I shall see you later, alligators and crocodiles. Goodbye.